There is a moment every single day that decides the direction of your life. It is quiet. It is ordinary. And most people miss it. It is the moment when you don't feel like doing what you know you should do. That moment is where lives are built, or quietly destroyed. Not by one dramatic failure, not by one massive mistake, but by small decisions repeated every day. You don't lose your future all at once. You trade it away in comfort-sized pieces. And that is why this audiobook exists. Welcome to Discipline is a Skill, a deep, honest exploration of why daily discipline is stronger than talent, why tiny actions quietly shape destiny, and why the people who win in life are not the most gifted, they are the most consistent. This is not about motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. This is about something far more powerful. Discipline. Discipline is not a personality trait. It is not something you are born with. It is not reserved for special people. Discipline is a skill, and skills can be trained. But first, we must destroy one dangerous myth. The myth that discipline is something you feel. You've been told to wait until you feel ready. You've been told to listen to your emotions. You've been told that when the motivation comes, you'll finally change. But let me tell you the truth most people avoid. If you wait until you feel like doing the work, you will wait forever. Discipline does not arrive with excitement. It does not knock politely. It does not announce itself. Discipline shows up when you are tired, when you are bored, when you are uncomfortable, when quitting would feel easier than continuing. That is where discipline lives. And the reason most people never change is simple. They obey their feelings instead of training their behavior. Think about it. How many times have you said, "I'll start tomorrow. I just need a break. I'm not in the mood today." Those sentences sound harmless, but repeated daily, they become a lifestyle of delay, a lifestyle of almost, a lifestyle of wasted potential. Talent doesn't save you from that. There are talented people stuck in lives they hate, talented people living far below their ability, talented people watching less gifted individuals pass them by. Why? Because talent without discipline expires. Discipline, on the other hand, compounds. One disciplined action today doesn't feel impressive, but repeat it tomorrow, then the next day, then the next. And suddenly, you are no longer the same person. This audiobook is not here to hype you up. It is here to reprogram how you think about effort. Because discipline is not about doing big things once. It is about doing small things even when no one is watching. It is about waking up when your bed is warm and your goals are cold. It is about continuing when progress feels invisible. It is about choosing growth when comfort whispers your name. And here is the truth that changes everything. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your habits. Your life right now is not an accident. It is a reflection of what you do repeatedly, not what you intend to do, not what you plan to do, what you actually do, daily. If you want a different future, you don't need a new personality. You need a new pattern, and patterns are built through discipline. But discipline does not begin with giant life changes. It begins with one decision: I will act even when I don't feel like it. That sentence separates amateurs from professionals, dreamers from builders, wishers from winners, because feelings are temporary, but actions create identity. Every time you act despite resistance, you send your brain a message. I am someone who follows through. Every time you quit, you send a different message. I am someone who gives in. Those messages stack. They become beliefs, and beliefs become behavior. This is why discipline is not about punishment. It is about self-respect. It is about keeping promises to yourself. It is about becoming someone you trust. And trust is not built by comfort. It is built by consistency. You don't wake up disciplined one day. You practice discipline until it becomes automatic. That is why this audiobook will not tell you to feel motivated. It will teach you how to move without motivation. It will show you how to train obedience to your own decisions. Build discipline through tiny daily actions. Stop negotiating with excuses. Strengthen your mind under pressure and become reliable to yourself no matter how you feel. Because the world does not reward potential. It rewards execution. And execution belongs to the disciplined. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone less talented than you is winning. Not because they are special, but because they showed up when you didn't feel like it. They did the boring work. They repeated the basics. They stayed consistent on days when quitting felt justified. And that is the uncomfortable truth. But it is also empowering because it means you can change, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, but today. In the next decision you make, in the next moment you feel resistance, in the next small action you choose to complete instead of delay. Discipline is built there. And in the next chapter, we are going to confront the most dangerous enemy of discipline, the one that feels harmless, reasonable, and comforting. Laziness disguised as logic. Chapter 2. Laziness disguised as logic. Laziness rarely announces itself as laziness. If it did, you would reject it instantly. You would see it coming, you would fight back. But laziness is smarter than that. It wears the mask of logic. It speaks in reasonable tones. It sounds calm, mature, even intelligent. It says things like, "You've had a long day. Rest is important too. You deserve a break. Just this once won't matter." And because it doesn't sound dangerous, you let it in. This is how discipline dies. Not through rebellion, but through negotiation. You don't quit your goals in one loud moment. You talk yourself out of them quietly. Think about it. How many times have you sat down, fully intending to do the work, and then talked yourself out of it with a perfectly reasonable excuse? Not an obvious excuse. A clever one. "I'll be more productive tomorrow. I need to get my head right first. I'm not at my best right now." That voice feels rational, but it is not your ally. It is the enemy wearing your own thoughts. Because discipline does not require perfect conditions. It requires commitment despite imperfection. High performers understand something most people never realize. If you wait for the perfect mindset, you'll never act. Action creates the mindset, not the other way around. But laziness flips that truth. It tells you to wait, to delay, to postpone effort until you feel better. And every time you listen, you reinforce a dangerous habit. You teach your brain that discomfort is optional. Let me be very clear. The moment you start negotiating with your standards, you begin lowering them. Discipline is simple, but it is not easy. It says, "This is what I do, regardless of how I feel." Laziness says, "Let's talk about it." And once the conversation starts, discipline usually loses. That's why disciplined people don't debate themselves. They decide once and then execute automatically. They don't ask, "Do I feel like it today?" They ask, "What did I commit to?" Because feelings change hourly. Commitments should not. Here is a powerful truth that may be uncomfortable to hear. Your mind is not designed to make you successful. It is designed to make you comfortable. Comfort feels safe. Comfort feels familiar. Comfort feels logical. But comfort is expensive. It costs you growth. It costs you momentum. It costs you the life you could have built. And the most dangerous part? Comfort never screams. It whispers. It tells you to slow down when you should push, to relax when you should focus, to quit when you should persist. That whisper becomes louder every time you obey it. And over time, something subtle happens. You stop trusting yourself. You start noticing the gap between what you say you'll do and what you actually do. And that gap erodes confidence. Because confidence is not built by hype. It is built by follow-through. Every time you break a promise to yourself, your self-respect takes a hit. Not consciously, but internally. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't finish, someone who delays, someone who gives in. And once that identity forms, discipline feels even harder. This is why the smallest acts of discipline matter so much. Waking up when you said you would, starting the task you've been avoiding, finishing something even when it feels boring. Those actions send a different message. I do what I say I'll do. That sentence is powerful. It creates internal alignment. It creates confidence without noise. It creates quiet strength. And here is the paradox. The more disciplined you become, the less effort discipline requires. At first, discipline feels heavy, uncomfortable, resistant, but repetition turns effort into identity. Eventually, discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. But that only happens if you stop negotiating. You must learn to recognize laziness when it disguises itself as logic. Ask yourself, is this truly rest or avoidance? Is this self-care or self-sabotage? Is this a strategic pause or fear in disguise? Honest answers change behavior. And this is where most people fail. They want discipline to feel good. But discipline doesn't feel good in the beginning. It feels right. Good feelings come later, as a consequence. The pride after finishing, the confidence after consistency, the freedom after structure. Yes, freedom. Because here is the ultimate truth most people never understand. Discipline is not restriction. Discipline is freedom. Freedom from regret. Freedom from chaos. Freedom from the emotional roller coaster of impulse. When you remove the daily decision-making, when you stop asking yourself whether to act, life becomes simpler. You execute, you progress, you move forward. And in the next chapter, we will break down the most powerful tool for building discipline, one that requires no motivation, no willpower, and no dramatic life changes. It is the system that turns discipline into something automatic, something inevitable, something unstoppable. Chapter 3. Discipline is built in the small moments. Most people think discipline is forged in big decisions. They believe it's about dramatic wake-up calls, life-changing resolutions, all-or-nothing transformations. They are wrong. Discipline is not built in the moments when everyone is watching. It is built in the quiet seconds when no one is paying attention. The 5 minutes you consider skipping. The task you almost postpone. The choice that feels insignificant. Those moments decide everything. Because discipline is not a personality trait. It is a pattern. And patterns are formed through repetition, not intensity. Repetition. You don't need to overhaul your life to become disciplined. You need to stop breaking small promises to yourself. That's it. Every time you say, "I'll do it later," and you don't, you weaken the habit of self-trust. Every time you say, "I'll start tomorrow," and you delay, you reinforce inconsistency. But the opposite is also true. Every time you act when you don't feel like it, you strengthen discipline. Not by force, by proof. Your brain learns through evidence. And the strongest evidence you can give it is action. Here's a reality most people never hear. Your brain does not respond to motivation. It responds to patterns. Motivation is emotional. Patterns are neurological. That's why motivation fades, and habits remain. So if discipline feels hard right now, it's not because you're weak. It's because your brain has been trained to quit early, and the way you retrain it is not with pressure, but with consistency. Start smaller than your ego wants, smaller than what feels impressive, smaller than what you think counts. Because the goal is not to impress anyone. The goal is to become someone who follows through. Do you want to know the fastest way to build discipline? Lower the barrier to entry. Instead of committing to 1 hour, commit to 5 minutes. Instead of perfection, commit to starting. Instead of finishing everything, commit to showing up. Because starting is the hardest part. Once you begin, momentum takes over, and momentum is more powerful than motivation ever was. But there's a deeper layer here. Discipline grows when actions become non-negotiable. Not dramatic, not heroic, non-negotiable. You don't debate brushing your teeth. You don't argue with yourself about locking the door. You don't need motivation for routines you've normalized. Discipline becomes easy when it stops being optional. This is why structure creates freedom. When your day has anchors, fixed actions that happen regardless of mood, your mind becomes calmer, less decision fatigue, less inner conflict, less self-doubt. You stop wasting energy negotiating with yourself. And here's the secret most people miss. The more decisions you remove, the more power you gain. Every disciplined habit eliminates a daily argument, and those saved arguments turn into focus, clarity, energy. That's why highly disciplined people often appear calm. They are not fighting themselves all day. They decided once and execute automatically. Now listen carefully. If you want discipline to last, you must attach it to identity, not outcomes. If your discipline depends on results, it will collapse under pressure. But if it depends on identity, it becomes unshakable. Instead of saying, "I'll work out to lose weight," say, "I'm the kind of person who trains." Instead of, "I'll focus to be successful," say, "I'm someone who finishes what I start." Identity turns discipline from effort into alignment. You are no longer forcing yourself, you are expressing who you are. And identities are protected. People will endure discomfort to protect who they believe they are. This is why small actions matter so much. They are votes for the person you are becoming. One skipped habit is not failure, but repeated skipping becomes identity. One small act of discipline is not transformation, but repeated action becomes character. This is where the real power is. Not in motivation, not in intensity, but in quiet consistency. And in the next chapter, we will expose one of the biggest lies holding people back: the belief that discipline means suffering. You'll learn how discipline actually reduces pain, not increases it, and why the most disciplined people feel freer, calmer, and more in control than everyone else. Chapter 4. Discipline is not punishment. It is relief. Most people resist discipline because they misunderstand it. They think discipline is pain, restriction, suffering, a life of saying no. But that belief is exactly why discipline feels heavy. Because when you see discipline as punishment, your mind fights it. Here is the truth no one tells you. Discipline does not add pain to your life. It removes pain from your future. Undisciplined living feels easy in the moment and expensive later. Disciplined living feels uncomfortable in the moment and peaceful later. That's the trade. Nothing more, nothing less. Think about the stress most people live with. Constant pressure, missed deadlines, financial anxiety, health issues that could have been prevented, relationships damaged by emotional reactions. None of that comes from discipline. It comes from avoiding it. Discipline is not the source of discomfort. It is the solution to it. When you train your body, you reduce future pain. When you manage your money, you reduce future stress. When you control your emotions, you reduce future regret. Discipline is delayed ease, and undisciplined living is delayed chaos. Once you see it this way, everything shifts. You stop asking, "How do I force myself to be disciplined?" and start asking, "How much future pain am I willing to tolerate?" Because every skipped habit is a bill you pass to your future self, and interest always compounds. Here's another reality that changes everything. Discipline is not about doing more. It's about doing less, consistently. Most people overwhelm themselves with massive plans. They create perfect schedules, extreme routines, unrealistic standards. Then they fail and quit. Not because they're incapable, but because they aim too high, too fast. True discipline is boring, repetitive, predictable, almost invisible. That's why it works. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And systems thrive on simplicity. One habit, one decision, one rule you follow no matter what. That's how discipline becomes sustainable. Now let's address something deeper. Why do people sabotage discipline? Because discipline exposes self-respect. When you don't follow through, it's not the task that hurts. It's the relationship with yourself. Every broken promise erodes trust. And when self-trust is low, confidence collapses. This is why discipline rebuilds confidence faster than motivation ever could. Not because you feel better, but because you prove to yourself that you can be relied on. Confidence is not a feeling. It is a track record. And discipline is how that track record is built. You don't wake up confident. You wake up disciplined. And confidence follows. Here's the paradox most people miss. Discipline creates freedom by creating boundaries. When everything is allowed, nothing feels stable. When some things are non-negotiable, your mind relaxes. Boundaries reduce chaos. They give your energy direction. That's why disciplined people often appear calm under pressure. They've already decided how they will act. No debate, no negotiation, no emotional bargaining. They removed choice and gained peace. Now ask yourself something honestly. How much mental energy do you waste every day deciding what you already know you should do? That exhaustion is not from work, it's from indecision. Discipline removes that weight, and once you experience that relief, you stop seeing discipline as restriction. You see it as protection. Protection from regret, protection from chaos, protection from becoming someone you don't respect. And in the next chapter, we'll go even deeper. We'll talk about why discipline collapses under emotion, and how to stay disciplined especially when motivation disappears. Because discipline that only works when you feel good is not discipline at all. Chapter 5. Discipline fails when emotions lead. Most people don't lose discipline because they are lazy. They lose discipline because they let emotions make decisions. They wake up tired. And emotion says, rest. They feel overwhelmed. And emotion says, avoid. They feel bored. And emotion says, escape. And without realizing it, emotion becomes the leader. Here's the hard truth. If your discipline depends on how you feel, you don't have discipline. You have conditions. And conditions collapse under pressure. Emotion is not evil, it's human. But emotion is reactive, short-term, focused on relief, not results. Discipline is the opposite. Discipline is proactive, long-term, focused on identity, not comfort. This is where most people get trapped. They wait to feel ready. But readiness is an emotion, and emotions are unreliable. You don't feel ready to wake up early. You don't feel ready to train. You don't feel ready to focus. Yet every time you wait for readiness, you give control away. The disciplined don't wait for permission from emotion. They act first and let emotion catch up. That's the order. Action arrow, identity arrow, emotion, not the other way around. This is why discipline feels unnatural at first, because you are reversing a lifetime of emotional habits. You're telling your mind, I don't need to feel like it. That sentence alone changes everything. When you stop negotiating with emotion, discipline becomes simple. Not easy, but simple. There is a powerful mental shift you must make. Discipline is not about winning the day. It's about honoring the rule. Rules remove emotion from the equation. I train on these days. I write at this time. I stop scrolling at this hour. No debate. No mood check. No excuses. Rules create certainty, and certainty calms the mind. This is why disciplined people appear emotionally strong. Not because they suppress emotion, but because emotion no longer decides behavior. Here's something most people never notice. Emotions pass faster when they're not obeyed. The urge to quit peaks, then fades. The resistance spikes, then dissolves. But when you obey emotion, you reinforce it. You teach your brain, this feeling controls me. And the next time it comes back stronger. This is how inconsistency becomes a personality. Discipline breaks that cycle, not with force, with repetition. Every time you act despite emotion, you weaken its authority. Every time you follow the rule anyway, you gain ground. Discipline is built in the moments no one sees, not when it's easy, but when it's quiet, when it's boring, when it's uncomfortable. This is where identity changes. You stop thinking, I'm trying to be disciplined, and start realizing, I am someone who follows through. That identity shift is everything, because once identity changes, discipline becomes self-sustaining. You don't ask, should I do this? You ask, is this who I am? Now here's the next level, and this is critical. Discipline alone is not enough. If your environment is chaotic, discipline will constantly be under attack. Which brings us to the next chapter. We're going to talk about how to engineer discipline by shaping your environment, not relying on willpower. Because willpower is limited, but systems are patient. And once you understand this, discipline stops feeling like a fight. It becomes automatic. Chapter 6. Engineer your environment, or lose the battle. If discipline relies only on willpower, it will eventually fail. Not because you're weak, but because willpower was never designed to carry everything. Your environment is either training you or draining you, and most people never notice how much it controls them. Look at your space. What you see when you wake up. What's within arm's reach? What distractions sit quietly, waiting? Your environment is always giving instructions. A messy room says, delay. A buzzing phone says, escape. An open browser tab says, avoid focus. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your surroundings. That's why discipline must be engineered, not fought. The discipline don't depend on motivation. They remove friction. They make the right action easier and the wrong action harder. This is how discipline becomes automatic. Think about it. If junk food is visible, you eat it. If your phone is beside you, you check it. If your shoes are by the door, you move. Environment shapes behavior before thought even begins. That's power. So instead of asking, how do I force myself? Ask, how do I design my day so discipline is the default? This is where most people resist. They want discipline without inconvenience. But discipline is inconvenience. Just structured inconvenience that leads somewhere. Here's a rule that changes everything. Never rely on self-control when structure can do the job. If you want to wake up earlier, sleep with your phone outside the room. If you want to focus, work with only one tab open. If you want to train, lay out your clothes the night before. Small adjustments, massive impact. This is how professionals operate. They don't wake up asking, do I feel like performing today? They wake up inside a system that demands it. And here's the secret most people miss. Environment doesn't just support discipline, it protects it. When life gets hard, when stress increases, when emotions run high, your system holds you steady. Without a system, discipline collapses under pressure. With a system, discipline becomes resilient. This is why successful people appear consistent even during chaos. They don't improvise their days, they repeat them, and repetition builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence builds identity. Identity sustains discipline. Now listen carefully. You don't need to change your entire life today. You need to change one environment, the one that keeps breaking your discipline. Start there. One room, one habit, one trigger. Remove what weakens you, add what supports you. Discipline grows where resistance is low. And once your environment works with you instead of against you, something shifts. Discipline stops feeling heavy. It feels inevitable. But there is still one enemy left. An enemy more dangerous than distraction. An enemy that quietly destroys discipline over time. Comfort. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about why comfort is addictive, why it feels safe, and why it keeps people average forever. And most importantly, how disciplined people learn to live just outside it. Chapter 7. Comfort is the most dangerous drug. Comfort feels harmless. It feels earned. It feels deserved. It feels like rest. But comfort, unmanaged, becomes the silent killer of discipline. Because comfort doesn't attack loudly. It whispers, you've done enough for today. You can start tomorrow. You don't need to push right now. And before you realize it, days pass, then weeks, then years. Not because you failed, but because you chose comfort too often. Comfort is addictive because it rewards you immediately. Discipline rewards you later. And the human brain is wired to chase what feels good now. That's why discipline must be trained, not hoped for. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your life will never change while you prioritize comfort. Comfort keeps you safe, but safety doesn't build strength. Comfort keeps you relaxed, but relaxation doesn't create growth. Comfort keeps you entertained, but entertainment doesn't create progress. Discipline begins where comfort ends. And no, that doesn't mean living in misery. It means choosing meaningful discomfort on purpose. The discomfort of waking up early. The discomfort of doing the hard task first. The discomfort of saying no to easy distractions. These discomforts are small, but they compound. And here's the shift disciplined people make. They stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What does this moment require?" That question changes everything, because feelings fluctuate. Requirements don't. When you operate by requirement, not emotion, discipline becomes non-negotiable. You show up because it's time to show up. You act because action is due. You don't wait to feel ready. You move to become ready. Now let's talk about something crucial. Discipline doesn't mean avoiding rest. It means earning rest. There is a massive difference. Earned rest restores you. Unearned comfort weakens you. One builds capacity, the other erodes it. This is why disciplined people can rest without guilt. They know they showed up. They paid the price before relaxing. That order matters. Work first, rest after, never reversed. When you reverse it, discipline dies. And here's something powerful. The more often you step into discomfort voluntarily, the less power discomfort has over you. Cold showers stop being scary. Hard conversations stop being avoided. Difficult tasks stop feeling impossible. Your tolerance grows. Your confidence grows. Your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries to be disciplined. You become someone who is disciplined. And once identity changes, behavior follows effortlessly. But there's one final piece that makes discipline permanent. Without it, even disciplined people burn out. Without it, consistency turns into pressure. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how discipline survives long-term, how to avoid burnout, how to stay sharp without breaking yourself, and how to build discipline that lasts a lifetime, not just a season. This is where discipline stops being force and becomes freedom. Chapter 8. Discipline without burnout. Most people don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they try to outwork their own humanity. They go all in, they push too hard, they demand perfection, and eventually, they crash. Burnout is not caused by discipline. Burnout is caused by unsustainable discipline. Discipline that ignores recovery. Discipline that punishes instead of trains. Discipline driven by fear instead of purpose. Real discipline is not about constant pressure. It's about consistent alignment. Let's be clear about something important. You are not a machine. You are a system. And every system needs balance to function at a high level. High performers don't do more. They do what matters, repeatedly, without destroying themselves. That's the difference. Burnout happens when you confuse intensity with effectiveness. When you think harder always means better. When you believe rest is weakness. But here's the truth disciplined people understand. Recovery is part of discipline. Sleep is discipline. Nutrition is discipline. Stillness is discipline. Not because they feel good, but because they allow you to perform again tomorrow. Discipline that lasts is cyclical. Push, recover, adapt, repeat. Not push endlessly until something breaks, and something always breaks. Here's the rule that saves discipline long-term. Never sacrifice tomorrow for today. If today's effort steals from tomorrow's ability to show up, you're not being disciplined. You're being reckless. This is where emotional intelligence meets discipline. You learn to listen, not to excuses, but to signals. Fatigue is a signal. Irritation is a signal. Mental fog is a signal. Signals don't mean stop. They mean adjust. Reduce volume, not standards. Change pace, not direction. This is how professionals operate. They don't quit when it's hard. They recalibrate so they can continue. And here's something most people never realize. Discipline should simplify your life, not complicate it. If your discipline system feels heavy, overwhelming, or chaotic, it's poorly designed. Strong discipline creates clarity. You know what matters. You know what to ignore. You know what comes next. Less decision fatigue, less internal conflict, more execution. This is why routines are powerful. Not rigid routines, reliable ones. You remove unnecessary choices, you reduce friction, you create momentum automatically, and momentum is fuel. The goal is not to be disciplined sometimes. The goal is to make discipline default. So when motivation disappears, and it will, you still move. Not because you feel strong, but because the system carries you. And when discipline becomes system-based instead of emotion-based, burnout loses its grip. But there's one more level, a deeper shift. The moment discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. That's where everything locks in. That's what we'll break down next. Identity-based discipline, the kind that doesn't require force, because it's aligned with who you believe you are. This is where discipline becomes effortless. Chapter 9. When discipline becomes identity. There is a moment in every disciplined person's life when something quietly shifts. They stop saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined," and they start living from a deeper truth. This is who I am. This is the moment discipline stops being exhausting, because you no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer argue. You no longer need hype, speeches, or motivation. You act because acting in alignment feels natural. Identity-based discipline is powerful because it removes friction. You don't ask, "Should I do this?" You ask, "What would someone like me do?" And the answer is automatic. A disciplined person doesn't force consistency. They protect it. They don't chase standards. They live by them. This is where most people get it wrong. They try to build discipline by focusing on actions alone. Wake up earlier, work harder, push more. But actions without identity don't last, because when pressure rises, identity wins. When you're tired, identity decides. When no one is watching, identity decides. When quitting would be easy, identity decides. This is why temporary discipline collapses, because deep down, the identity never changed. Here's the shift that changes everything. Instead of saying, "I need to be disciplined," you start saying, "I don't miss workouts. I finish what I start. I do hard things daily. I keep promises to myself." Simple statements, but repeated often enough, they rewire behavior. Your brain wants consistency between who you believe you are and what you do. So if you identify as disciplined, acting otherwise feels uncomfortable. That discomfort becomes self-correcting. No force required. This is also why public identity matters. Not bragging, but clarity. When people know you as reliable, focused, consistent, you feel internal pressure to stay aligned. And that pressure works for you, not against you. But identity discipline goes even deeper. It's not about ego. It's about values. You discipline yourself not because you want approval, but because you respect yourself. You understand something most people don't. Self-respect is built, not declared. Every time you do what you said you would do, self-trust grows. Every time you quit on yourself, self-trust erodes. And once trust is gone, motivation has to work harder. This is why discipline compounds. Small wins reinforce identity. Identity reinforces behavior. Behavior creates results. Results reinforce identity again. It's a loop. And once you're inside it, life changes. You stop feeling scattered. You stop doubting yourself. You stop starting over every Monday. Because your life is no longer driven by mood. It's driven by standards. But there's one final truth about discipline that few talk about. The reason discipline beats talent. The reason it outlasts motivation. The reason it quietly builds extraordinary lives. Discipline gives you control. Control over your time. Control over your habits. Control over your direction. And control is freedom. That's where this journey leads. Not to perfection. Not to obsession, but to freedom through self-mastery. And that's what we'll close with next.